Oh, good. A new article at MacyAfterlife.com, written by Mark Macy, entitled Time Hopping, The Amazing Story of Ken Webster. And Mr. Macy begins. Ken Webster's story starts in late autumn 1984, in his cottage in the village of Dodleston, sitting on the border between England and Wales, 30 miles south of Liverpool. Ken and his friends Debbie Oakes and Peter Trinder start experiencing strange goings-on in the cottage. First, there are footprints on the wall and writing on the floor, as though a dyslexic ghost gets things mixed up. Then different kitchen items keep getting stacked up into tower formations. In the coming months, the phenomena evolve into dozens of computer texts in Old English, from someone identifying himself as Lucas Wainman, who says he's currently living in the same cottage in Dodleston in the 1500s, late into the reign of King Henry VIII, who was currently married to his wife, Queen Catherine Parr. Here's a couple of messages with translations from Lucas. I hath no kinfolk to find. Mine wife was wrenched with thy pestilence, and my lord didst take her soul, and her unborn son. Ouch. Mine farm 'tis humble, but it hath a pretty parcel of land. And mine friend when me saith Desiderius, mine goodly friend I meaneth, I had only met with him thrice at Cambridge. He had goodly humour, an old, and would oft be playful, and sing to himself. When he wert nat Psyche, he didst pass in 1536 at Bale Lucas. What seems to be happening is this. Ken is a teacher who has access to a computer from the maths and computer department at his school, which he sets up in his home. A copy or spiritual template of that computer or some other spirit world communication device somehow materializes in the 1500s home of Lucas, who sees it as a sort of mystical device with strange lights through which he can communicate with otherworldly beings, Ken and his friends from the 20th century. Both computers or devices are in the same physical location, but 4 centuries apart. I think what Ken Webster had was an ITC bridge. Yang Foods, a Chinese healer from the 3rd century AD, told our in-it group, in specially suited experimenters. I lost my paragraph, sorry guys. An ITC bridge of I think what Ken Webster had was an ITC bridge, similar to the ITC bridge of INIT. And I've come to believe lately that there are several key ingredients that make an ITC bridge possible. So this is some kind of time bridge, I guess. One is ITC disposition. I wish he would explain his initials here. One is an ITC disposition. I suspect that Debbie Oakes or Ken Webster had an ITC disposition needed for the Dodleston Bridge, the way that Maggie and Jules Harsh-Fishbach had an ITC disposition that fueled our INIT bridge. Yang Foods, a Chinese healer from the 3rd century, told our INIT group. So they also communicated with the past through their own computer, evidently. In specially suited experimenters, to whom you wrongly refer as successful, that develops a sort of emotional lance in the center of their emotional consciousness, which materializes in audible and invisible tones, signs and pictures in your realm. People are usually born with this particular polarization of consciousness. Others may try as hard as they can, and they will not get these results. To this day, I have only a vague sense of what that actually means, but it's probably the best available definition of what I would call an ITC disposition. So an ITC disposition is one prerequisite for an ITC bridge. A second prerequisite is a competent spirit team. From our group, it was Time Stream Spirit Group. For Ken and Debbie's, it's Group 2109, whom we will talk about in a moment. That competent spirit group also has to include finer beings or ethereal beings who have the power and will to sustain and protect the ITC bridge. Meanwhile, 20th century Ken and 16th century Lucas spend much of 1985 getting to know each other's worlds, lives, and personalities. Debbie starts having frequent encounters with Lucas in her dreams, and Lucas develops a crush on Debbie. While Debbie is a charming, sensible, down-to-earth young woman here on Earth, she sometimes finds herself feeling like a flustered schoolgirl during her dream encounters with Lucas, who by modern standards would be considered a rather chauvinistic and domineering, sometimes bullying fellow. I couldn't get that out fast enough, sorry. Sometimes bully, just go on, Bill. But he had a kind heart. Bullying. As a warm friendship develops across time, however, disruptive or contentious or troublesome forces begin to enter the picture, forces on both ends of the bridge. I must take a short break here and try to find out what the heck he's talking about. The ITC bridge. What is an ITC bridge? Let's look it up real quick here. What is an ITC bridge? Abbreviation for the term instrumental transcommunication. Thanks for clearing that up. As warm friendship develops across time, however, there are problems on both sides of the bridge. On Lucas's end, it's called Group 2109, who seems to be coordinating the bridge, or the Leams, as Lucas calls it. The 2109 group seem to be researchers from our future who are experimenting with time manipulation between 20th century Earth and 16th century Earth. But who are they really? Again, I try to explain at the end of this article. Ken soon starts to get texts from 2109 as well as from Lucas. The 2109 texts are in a more modern form of English, and the messages not particularly friendly and heartfelt like the texts from Lucas. This is one example of a text from the 2109 group, who inform Ken and his friends that the project is being managed by higher forces, whom I suspect are finer spiritual beings, who are closely monitoring, regulating, and protecting the bridge. The 2109 group also informs Ken that Lucas is not the fellow's true identity. His real name is Thomas, or Tomas. Okay, here's a text from the 2109 group. We are all capable of making mistakes, aren't we? Yes. Telephones. The things that you may consider advanced communication. If only you could see what is to come. We, in your better interests, made slight adjustment to our conversations. But please let us call him by his true name. With Thomas. We are not entirely in command of this experiment. So we can only say that communications will cease. No earlier than November. Not necessarily with Thomas. For you see, you want some proof for your little comic. Well, we think you should first try to revise what has already been said. If you tell us who is one, then we shall give you 100% evidence for the people directly investigating your phenomena. Signed 2109. This is typical of many messages from the group, which are often cryptic and condescending, a fact that stirs up growing frustrations and suspicions among Ken and his friends. Such emotional bristling does not lend itself to a healthy, stable ITC bridge. according to the information from our INIT group. Enter the investigators from the Society for Physical Research. Psychical research. Why would they be in physical research? Or the SPR. Typical of many SPR investigators, John Bucknall and Dave Welch are skeptical team. They suspect from the onset that Ken's claims and experiences are possibly a hoax. Lucas senses trouble right away. Quote, "Are they not scholars from our beloved Oxford? Why do they come to see my leams? What cause do these men serve by doing so?" Ken Webster had early hopes about the SPR investigators. Quote, 14 May 1985, Mr. John Bucknall rang. He was, he said, the SPR field officer, which John Stiles had promised. I took to him instinctively. He sounded young, intelligent, and precise. I felt relieved, in a way that a patient often finds relief in simply knowing that the doctor will call. John Bucknall, so I conjectured, with a few questions and a couple of evenings sitting quietly with Debbie in a sealed house, would proclaim us all extremely sane. He might even write a report for the Society describing just how valuable the case was. But this optimism soon changed. Ken also wrote, Dave Welch huffed and puffed his way to and fro with a reel-to-reel tape recorder, bags of wires, rolls of sticky tape, and other assorted items. John Bucknall detailed a plan for the evening. In the studio, they would set up a listening post, with a microphone run out of the window, across the kitchen roof, and through a slightly open skylight into the kitchen itself. They would set it running and wait in the living room. End quote. Also, quote, John Bucknall was trying not to chain smoke. These investigators are chain smoking in your home, okay. Real professionals. He emphasized that many of these sorts of phenomena are entirely fraudulent or are massive elaborations upon some quite explainable occurrence. Was he here to investigate or to name the guilty persons? End quote. My take? ITC is a difficult process here on Earth. Whatever communication. Let's call it inter-time communication. A stable bridge requires trust, honesty, friendship, and love. But humans by nature are not always trusting, honest, friendly, and loving. When suspicious, fearful people get involved with an ITC bridge. The bridge destabilizes and disappears. Kind of a catch-22. That was probably the case with Ken Webster's ITC bridge, which seemed to work best when the SPR investigators were not around. In other cases, ITC bridges will invariably falter when researchers are dishonest, insincere, self-seeking, malicious, or chain smokers. No, I added the chain smokers myself. That wasn't the case with Ken Webster and the Dodleston Bridge, but it seems to be a kind of rule of thumb for ITC research everywhere. There must be trust, honesty, friendship, and love, the kind of things you'd probably find prominently in the hearts and psyches of people like Debbie Oakes and Maggie Fishbach. First, was there an actual physical communication device in Lucas's cottage 4 centuries ago on the physical Earth? Or did all of that happen on an astral template of the Earth? I suspect the latter. I've come to believe that every material thing in our material universe, whether a molecule or a rock or a tree, or a person or a planet, everything has a spiritual template. And that templates exist while the physical thing exists, and it continues to exist after the physical thing dies or is destroyed. So the ITC bridge between Ken and Lucas was not built between 2 physical locations on physical Earth at different times, but between Ken's physical location and the astral location where Lucas, Tomas, Group 2109, and other personalities are still living since the death of their carnal bodies. From our perspective of three-dimensional living, we could say that Ken's physical location and Lucas's spiritual location are superimposed over each other, just as the physical Earth and Earth's spiritual templates are also superimposed. At one point in the book, Lucas is taken away to prison. Ken and Debbie are alarmed and worried that Lucas has died there. Thank you, Dinku, for gifting 5 NightTerrors memberships. I'm sorry, it says Dinkum Aussie there. Sorry, your name's abbreviated there, my friend. Thank you, Dinkum Aussie. Very generous, sir. Thank you. Shane Barber was gifted a membership by Dinkum Aussie, as was Big Daddy X84, as was Jason, as was the Dachshund Master, as was the Morning Dove. Thank you, sir. I suspect the truth is that Lucas cannot die because he's not a carnal human living in a carnal drama. He's an astral spirit who is reliving patterns of earthly dramas that keep spinning in the astral world or spiritual template in which he's now living. Here's a message and translation from a fellow named John that arrived while Lucas was in prison. Now, this is interesting. So someone from the past named John is now sending a message to the present day. And this person called John says, or types out on the computer from the past, "The sheriff does ask that thou speak to him with thy selvin shown to his eye for thy purpose, rather than through the computer," it says here commuter, "which he hath no sight for. Else the computer must be taken to Lucas, and Boughton prison, or Nantwich if he be there, to show he spake truths. But it is not easy to move the device," I'm going to the translation here, "as it seems to disappear when any have tried. Only when Lucas is here does it appear solid. I beg a quick reply so I may go to him. Signed, John." This message sounds rather insane in this carnal world Earth that we inhabit. But in an astral world, or a spiritual template of Earth, it makes more sense. Lucas might have been inconveniently carted off to prison, while in one of those astral dramas that keep spinning around in that shadow world. But the computer template device, the LEAMS, that's been materialized by Group 2109 and their supervising team in Lucas's astral cottage, has to stay in the cottage. And since the device is synchronized to or customized for Lucas, it becomes less solid and less operable when Lucas is not present. So Lucas is shortly released from prison and brought home so he can continue his ITC work until the bridge is scheduled by the finer spiritual advisors, or whoever they are, to close down sometime around November Earth time. This kind of scenario is certainly not easy to follow and grasp with our carnal minds. But I think it starts to make more sense as we begin to understand our spiritual nature, which has always been wrapped up in mystery for us noble savage humans who spend our lives running around and bumping into each other on planet Earth. There's a bigger multi-dimensional picture that ITC researchers are starting to get a better glimpse of. Again, ITC, inter-time communication. Hopefully humanity will be patient with us, as together we try to figure it out. Second, how were all of those messages entered into the computer template device in Lucas's 16th century cottage? Did Lucas and the others have to sit in front of a keyboard and hunt and peck the messages painstakingly with their fingers, the way that we carnal humans must do in this world of denseness? Or is there some means of converting their thoughts into words? Again, I suspect the latter. While Ken Webster's Dodleston Bridge and the time stream bridge we operated late last century. An even more famous bridge was underway at Scole, England. The Scole group asked their spirit friends on one occasion how they were able to speak with such loud, clear voices that filled the room where the researchers sat in a circle. One spirit replied, "We do not actually speak. We think our message. And there are others here who by some miracle are able to convert our thoughts into the words you hear in your world." End quote. The same was probably true for Ken Webster and our group. When our spirit friends spoke to us through phones or radios, or when they sent text messages. Bad Wolf Gamer, thank you for this super chat. Bad Wolf says, "Happy New Year, Bill. May you live long and prosper." Live long and prosper, Bad Wolf. When our spirit friends spoke to us through phones or radios, or when they sent text messages through our computers, they did not speak or type the way we do here on Earth. They simply had to think their messages. And there were teams of experts around them in the spirit world who had the knowledge, ability, and will to convert those thoughts into sounds and text and images that would be meaningful to the carnal humans on this dense carnal Earth. That's the gist of the communications at the present time of human evolution. It's still dense, but we're all doing the best we can. As we humans become more astute or multidimensional, or more acclimated to our dealings with the invisible worlds around us, ITC will become a more fluid process, intertime communication. Of that I have no doubt, finishes the author.